guys, Eric and Joey here to talk about The Walking Dead, the episode Arrow on the Doorpost. This was a calm before the storm episode. I mean, they kind of articulated that in the episode at one point. Daryl and Martinez kind of saying, well, you know, we'll eventually fight, but right now we're talking.
Right now we're just smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
I like the episode for the most part. I think it's really interesting that instead of going the expected route of like, oh, here's Rick and the governor and they're gonna fight.
Yeah.
They went with this really kind of like really cool atmosphere and really great performances from both Rick and the governor.
Yeah, I thought it was a really strong episode for both them. Andrew Lincoln, David Morrissey especially. I mean, they're both great, but David Morrissey kind of had a moment in this episode. Yeah, he had the Emmy clip where he talked about what happened to his wife.
Right.
And I did think it was a very well acted, very sort of interesting scene to see play out.
Yeah, and that's continuing the thing we've talked about with the governor all along in the show. He's much more sympathetic and I don't want to say relatable, but you can understand him better than you can, for instance, in his comics incarnation. So I really like that.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting kind of side to this psychopath. In the midst of this, we had the return after 1 week off of Andrea and annoying Andrea with her.
Yes,
I did enjoy, just because Andrea kind of sucks, the governor and Rick both telling her to leave the room.
Like, yeah, she does suck, doesn't she?
Right.
Like,
that was the moment where they really bonded, I felt,
Yeah.
Rick and the governor.
Yeah.
What did you think of Andrea in this episode?
I mean, same old stuff with Andrea, and especially, you know, with the scene between her and Herschel, and Herschel's like, come back with us, and she has this moment where she's like, can get away from the governor and do, you know, just go in a new direction and maybe freshen up the character a little bit, but she's like, and then she goes back with the governor. With this guy that she knows is a psychopath.
Yeah, that's what didn't make sense to me either. I understand the whole I don't feel like I fit in with anyone idea.
Yeah.
But given that, if you look at both groups, she knows so many bad things about the governor now. This episode actually showed us that now at least she knows, even if she doesn't know the specifics, that something very ugly happened with Maggie and the governor.
Yeah.
There's a million reasons not to go back with the governor and at least go with the people who she might be on the outs with, but are not freaking scary, evil people.
Right, and I get the idea too that she cares about the people in Woodbury, but the problem is we don't ever really see that in the show.
No.
Like, it's just sort of kind of implied.
It's
maybe,
an idea.
Yeah, exactly. So if we understood that more, maybe I'd be more willing to accept her going back to Woodbury, but...
Right. I did like sort of the bonding between the soldiers that was going on. Like Martinez, who we hadn't really gotten to know until this episode, him and Daryl, first kind of trying to one-up each other, but then kind of having that soldiers sharing a cigarette moment.
Yeah.
And then Herschel and Milton, too.
I really liked Herschel and Milton. I thought the one-upmanship scene was really cheesy and goofy, but the aftermath of it was really nice, where they're just sort of, they don't even say much. They're just sort of like, this is the hand we've been dealt.
You will admit, though, that Martinez, the bat to the zombie head to the silo, that was strong.
Yeah, and also that he swings it around like a sword. It was just like, all right, I'll take it.
I wonder what his backstory is. Yeah. But there's some other good stuff there with those characters bonding. Back at the prison, we got to look more at sort of Glenn trying to be assertive. I did like that he kind of stood up to Merle, even though Merle was still trying to go behind his back. Yeah,
I mean, that was a nice moment. I think the better part of the prison stuff was Glenn and Maggie sort of working all those issues out. And get an extended sex scene, which is always nice, I guess.
Yes.
So
there was some making love on The Walking Dead.
There was.
I am glad the same thing happened in season 2 as far as like a rift between Glenn and Maggie we like these characters, we want them to get along, so I understand inserting conflict, but at the same time you do kind of always want them. There's so much going on in the show that let's have this couple be,
have something good going on instead of just like bleak misery all the time.
Right. So hey, they got a nice sex scene. And then the end of the episode, obviously, we find out what the governor wants, and he makes it very plain and simple. He wants Michonne. That's his terms.
And I really like that dynamic, especially in the context of the last episode where we finally get to see Michonne and Rick sort of get along a little bit, and she's getting more into the group. And so now, had this episode happened before the experience with Morgan and everything, and Michonne sort of warming up to everybody, I'm curious how that decision would have been made, as opposed, like, now Rick's conflicted about it, but maybe 3 episodes ago he would have been like, okay, sure. And I think that's really interesting.
And he is conflicted, but at the same time you're seeing, just what a harsh world it is when he's saying to Herschel, like, well, what if it's Michonne's life versus your daughter's life, and sort of having to make this horrible decision. At the same time, Rick does know there's a good chance the governor will just betray them, and we know that's exactly what the governor plans to do.
And that's going back to their whole scene for a minute. I think that's where the performances are so strong, because you know that both of them are telling each other things that they don't really mean.
Right.
Or even they're just lying about their groups in general, and I think that makes that whole scene, like they're really just sitting around talking, but it's still really intense and really well directed and well acted, and I love that about this episode.
I do think it's funny that by the end of the episode, I believe that Milton might help Rick's group more than Andrea at this point. Just because Andrea can't seem to make a decision, whereas Milton seems so troubled at the end by the fact that they're going to betray Rick's group. You have the idea that there's a seed there for something to happen by the end.
And he's an interesting character. I would love to see him, maybe next season sort of ingrained into Rick's group. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting if he doesn't get horribly killed in the next couple weeks. Let us know what you think. We're going into the last 3 episodes of the season. Do you think it's time to ramp this up? What'd you think of the summit? And we'll see you next week. Talk more Walking Dead. Thanks.